So, hello, welcome, namaste, and good afternoon. Thanks so much for those of you joining me in the room. Thanks to those of you joining me on Zoom, and gratitude for those of you listening to the recording afterwards. This is a little Dharma talk that I like to call Living from the Heart, all about this 18-inch spiritual journey, which can sometimes take many lifetimes, simply to travel from the head to the heart. I'd like to begin with a poem of my own as a lead into this week's topic. Start with the teachings, close with a meditation, and have some time at the end for question and answer. And today's poem is called Miracles. What if each day before awakening, two angels descended, holding your soul by each arm and placed it delicately in your body? We do not need to walk on water. To be alive and to be here is a miracle. We are energy that can speak, light given a body with a mission to love, be loved, and learn. God has always been a passionate artist, and you a starry night framed in skin. Breathe in your own divinity. Follow the ancient scriptures written in your own heart and begin this pilgrimage to your destiny. So today's topic is on how this present moment is a precious moment and how all the wonders of life are here, all the miracles of life are here, all of the conditions for happiness are here. And our task is to be present for it and cultivate a level of open-hearted presence awareness so that we don't miss a single moment. And I'll begin by talking about a poet that I love. He's still alive, and his name is Mark Nepo. He has a lovely book called The Book of Awakening, and another book called The Exquisite Risk. And this is what we are taking, the exquisite risk to be fully present in each and every moment as it arrives. And because nobody knows what's going to happen next, it is a risk to cultivate a level of presence and openness to be there for whatever comes. And not too long ago, Mark Nepo was diagnosed with cancer, and he underwent years of cancer treatment. And he described his journey in one of his books. And as you know, cancer treatment can sometimes be very rough, very challenging, and very painful. And he talks about slowly being able to do less and less things. He used to jog, wasn't able to jog. He used to walk, and suddenly was unable to walk and was simply bedridden. Much of his body was in pain, so he simply was only able to be in bed in the hospital while undergoing treatment. Suddenly it became too painful just to move his arms, just to move his legs. And the only thing that he could do was breathe. The only thing that he could focus on was the in-breath and the out-breath, sitting there in the hospital bed, breathing in and breathing out. And he said he took each new breath as a sign that he was still alive. And essentially, his whole world became the breath. And he wrote this poem. I wish you the ability to breathe after pain, to begin again, though nothing else seems possible. I wish you resilience, to part like the ocean and accept like the sky. I wish you survival, to take in life like a trapped miner finding an air hole and praising it as God. I wish you courage, to ask of everything you meet, what bridge are we? I wish you that the kindness that you are can brighten your way like orange leaves falling about the face of a doe. I wish you endless journey that seldom appears as we imagine. I wish you curiosity to make a boat of wonder and an oar of gratitude. So it's easy to get complacent. It's easy to lament on what we don't have rather than feel gratitude for what we do have. And it is a miracle to be here. It is a miracle to be alive. And if you are breathing, it means you are alive. And the breath, therefore, is also a miracle and also a wonder. And Bill Bryson put it this way: take a moment from time to time to remember that you are alive. I know this sounds a trifle obvious, but it is amazing how little time we take to remark upon this singular and gratifying fact. By the most astounding stroke of luck, an infinitesimal portion of all the matter in the universe came together to create you. And for the tiniest moment in the great span of eternity, you have the incomparable privilege to exist. Chogyam Trungpa says that there is never a dull moment when you are in touch with reality as it is, when you are in touch with this moment as it is, because this moment is endlessly unfolding. However, our mind is an incredible habituation-making machine. It loves to reach homeostasis. And as a result, it's going to become complacent. Any constant stimulation of consciousness will eventually become unconscious. And we will forget the joy of breathing, the joy of walking, the joy of eating. But as we say, all the conditions of happiness are right here. You have eyes that are in good condition, that can see the birds, see the trees swaying in the wind. You have ears in good condition that can listen to the sound of the water waving in the river, to hear your lover tell you that they love you. And you have a body in good condition that can do much more than simply breathe. But even if it could only breathe, you can let the world be your breath. You have a body in good condition that can dance, that can practice yoga. And it's easy to lament on, yes, but I have this ache here, or this ache here, or this deficiency in this area of my life. But this is part of our practice, recognizing that every moment is new, only happening once, and never again in the history of the universe. So you might have heard this term mindfulness. And whenever you hear any ancient topic or subject or concept that has been translated into English, realize there are many ways to think about and formulate this idea. So the word for mindfulness actually is smriti, samyak smriti. And smriti means to remember. It is a form of memory. So the opposite of mindfulness is not mindlessness, it is forgetfulness. We have forgotten to be present, to be here, and we have forgotten what matters, and we have forgotten that this very life is a miracle. So Thich Nhat Hanh says, the most important thing is to remember the most important thing. And I love the open-endedness of this. The most important thing is to remember the most important thing. So that to me is what we do as soon as we sit down on our yoga mat, as soon as we sit down on our meditation cushion, is to ask ourselves, what is the most important thing? What truly matters most to you in this life? And then we set our sankalpa, we set our intention. We set to live our life from a place that matters the most. But if you do want a bit of guidance on what to remember, what to practice remembrance or remindfulness of, we do have what are known as the 4 reminders. And the 4 reminders are these: the preciousness of human life, that's 1. Impermanence, that's 2. Karma, that's 3. And suffering, that's 4. So the first reminder is that your human life is precious. Even if you adopt a certain Eastern cosmological worldview, that we are in an endless cycle of samsara, an endless cycle of birth and rebirth and reincarnation. Still, pretty much every spiritual approach does view a human birth as extraordinarily fortuitous, as extraordinarily precious, because you have the greatest capacity to awaken. One time in my studies, I heard that a Buddhist koan is to ask, does a dog have Buddha nature? And I was told in my studies that this was one of those unanswerable questions. So then, when I was in Thailand speaking to a monk, I asked him, does a dog have Buddha nature? I was hoping it would be some gotcha question. And he goes, of course, flat out, of course, absolutely. And then he went on to say, but it is a little more covered up. In other words, we human beings have a greater capacity to change our nature. So, what I mean by that is our goal is to free ourselves from our karmic conditioning, and our actions create our karma. And we have the natural ability to not accumulate more karma. For example, we can choose to become a vegetarian or vegan and not take other species' life in order to maintain our sustenance. It would be very, very hard for a tiger to change its tiger nature to not kill other animals. It is possible, it's just slightly covered up. Just like a dog's Buddha nature is also slightly more covered up. But a human birth is a precious birth and a fortuitous one because we have this capacity. We have the greatest capacity to awaken from the illusion of this world and be free from the wheel of samsara and conditioned existence. So the metaphor, and the common metaphor to describe the almost sheer improbability of being born as a human, involves imagining that at the bottom of the ocean, there is a turtle, and the turtle is blind. And at the very top of the ocean, and as you can imagine, oceans are very large. At the very top of the ocean, there is a stick with a small hole in the middle of it. And every 100 years, the blind turtle goes up to the ocean, to the top of the ocean, to get a little bit of air, and then he goes back down. And then when the probability happens that the turtle happens to stick its nose through the hole in the stick in the infinitely vast ocean, that is the odds of being born as a human. And this is part of our remembering. This is part of our reminding ourselves what a gift it is, what an opportunity it is to be born as a human being. So I think it's quite telling that the first reminder is that the human life is a precious one. And the second reminder is that nothing lasts. The second reminder is the reality of impermanence, of interdependence, that everything in this universe is constantly, ceaselessly changing. Everything is moving, everything is coming into being and out of being. What does that mean when we say it's a precious human life that you have and nothing lasts? It means every moment is new. Every day is new. Each new day, you are given 24 brand new hours to live with compassion in your heart and to be fully in the moment. So when a lot of people hear, for example, the Buddhist metaphysics that everything is empty and nothing lasts, it can absolutely feel like a bit of nihilism. That, well, nothing has any inherent nature and nothing lasts, so therefore nothing matters. But actually, that is the exact opposite conclusion one should draw, that because nothing lasts forever, every moment it exists is a special moment. It actually makes life exquisite. It actually makes life precious. Recognizing that we have a precious human life and that life is impermanent, that we too will die someday, makes every moment, every day a gift to enjoy. So the first reminder is that human life is precious. Second reminder, nothing lasts. Third reminder is that your actions will bear fruit. This is the rule of karma. Karma comes from the Sanskrit kri, which means to act, just like Kriya Yoga is the yoga of action. So too, karma means action. And it is believed that we reap what we sow, that every action that you do in this life will have its end result. In other words, everything that you do matters, right? We have this essential idea in the Western world that there's no fundamental order or law to the universe. If you were to go into an alleyway and commit a crime and nobody saw you, then there will be no consequences to your actions. But here we say any action that you do, whether good or bad, will reap its reward or punishment. So what does that mean? It means we must be mindful of our actions and we must look deeply into the root of our actions. So just as our sankalpa and just as our intention is planting the seed of our intention in order that it may bear fruit in the world, so too we have to look at the roots of our actions. So if you ever tended a garden, what do we know? If you're going to water the plants, are you going to water at the flower? Are you going to water at the leaves? No, you're going to water it at the root. Similarly, with the weeds, are you going to just pull the flower off of the weed or pull the stem off of the weed? No, it's going to grow back. If you want the weed not to grow back, you have to find the root and you have to pull it out. So in our task of dissolving our karma that keeps us in bondage, we have to look at the root of our action, which is our thought, which is why the Buddha said our entire life arises from the tip of our intention, because our actions begin as a thought in our mind. So we are learning to become masters of our own mind by sitting and noticing our thoughts, noticing the desire to itch without necessarily scratching, so that we may absolve ourselves of our karmic bondage. And the fourth reminder is that there will be suffering, that life will not go exactly the way you want it all the time. And this to me, again, is a very promising idea because it means that there's nothing wrong with you, that you didn't do anything wrong if you are experiencing suffering in your life. We can take the pressure off of us. No self-blame. We think if we made all the right decisions, we would have all of the joy and none of the suffering. But that is simply not the case. So this is our remindfulness. This is our smriti practice to remind ourselves the preciousness of human life and what a gift it is to be here. And I was thinking about this very recently. I was thinking about Mark Nippo's journey of only being able to breathe, because just about a couple of weeks ago, I was experiencing a problem with my foot. And it hurt just to place any weight on my foot. And as a yoga teacher, this is quite embarrassing to be limping around the room. Nobody wants to see that from their yoga teacher. So obviously I had to sub out a few classes. And I took care of it, and things are much better now. And now I have so much gratitude for every step that I take. I go, wow, I can take a step and not be in pain. Just as Mark Nippo can breathe and not be in pain now that he is cancer-free. And now I appreciate each and every step that I take. So this is another thing that we learn in our practice. We are welcoming in impermanence and the reality that nothing lasts, and we are welcoming in the reality of suffering, because difficulties, challenges, pain, and suffering This is like fuel. This is like gasoline to the light of our spiritual awakening. We're not here to avoid any difficulties. We're here to use it. As the saying goes, no mud, no lotus. Without difficulties, suffering, pain, and attachment, you will not find the light of your own awakening. So we're here to metabolize it, to digest it, and to be present for it. So Joseph Campbell says, where you stumble and fall, there you will find gold. So there's so many reasons why this is. So many really painful, really challenging circumstances in our life can be an extraordinary wake-up call. Mark Nepo now has an extraordinary gratitude for each day of his life. I have extraordinary gratitude now for each step that I can take. So even when we have something like an injury, this is something that we can use. It's something that we can metabolize. It's something that we can learn from. So, as an example, with my foot, first of all, I went to PT and I learned some amazing exercises to keep a strong, healthy, and mobile foot. I also learned that the shoes that I was using had worn down enough that there was no cushioning and it was causing a certain bit of inflammation. I also had a certain level of embodied awareness because now that my foot was in pain, I noticed anytime I sit in a chair, I'm always tempted to put one foot underneath of me and sit on it. And then I'm like, that's also the foot that is in pain right now. So I've now become aware that I have this body position that I tend to be in, and it's causing pain in my life. So anytime any yoga student comes up to me and they're like, yeah, I have this injury, I think, how fantastic. Now you have an incredible opportunity to learn. You get to learn about your body and your anatomy, and you get to cultivate awareness. Because when we do have certain pain in our body, it's always a signpost asking for more attention. So when you do feel like, oh, this shoulder is tight, that's a wonderful opportunity to explore why it's tight. And it's usually habitual things that we do without even realizing it. So maybe every time you brush your teeth, you put one hand on the counter, you lean on that hand, and then you brush with the other hand. Well, that's going to cause all sorts of imbalances in your body. Maybe whenever you're talking to someone, you're always leaning against the wall in a particular way. So any injury, any pain in the body is an extraordinary opportunity to use that to learn more about your body, to learn more about yourself, to cultivate a level of awareness, and also to cultivate a certain level of gratitude for all the times that part of your body was not in pain. And then when you free yourself of that pain, it will end up with an overwhelming sense of gratitude that you are no longer in pain because we all have the capacity to heal ourselves. So here's a story. A clever smuggler came to the border with a donkey. The donkey's back was heavily laden with straw. The official at the border was suspicious and pulled apart the man's bundles until there was straw all around, but no valuable thing in the straw was found. The official, still skeptical, says, I know you're smuggling something, but allowed him to pass. Now, this continued for a very long time. Every single week, the man would come with his donkey full of hay, and the border patrol guard would assume he's hiding something in the hay, tear it apart, not find anything. 10 years went by of this happening, and the official never found anything hidden in the straw bundles on the donkey's back. Finally, the official was one day away from retirement, and he saw the smuggler and said, please tell me, I know you're smuggling something. What are you smuggling? Donkeys, he replied. It's right here. It's right under our nose, what we are looking for. If we seek to find the answer, we will simply go in the wrong direction. What we seek is right here. All the conditions for happiness are right here with each step that you take and each breath that you make. So Jack Kornfield says, where you are is the perfect place to awaken. This moment is the exact place to practice compassion and loving awareness. You have all the ingredients to breathe and find freedom just where you are. John Wellwood put it this way: forget about enlightenment. Sit down wherever you are and listen to the wind that is singing in your veins. Feel the love, the longing, and the fear in your bones. Open your heart to who you are right now, not who you would like to be, not the saint you're striving to become, but the being right here before you, inside you, around you. All of you is holy. You are already more and less than whatever you can know. Breathe out, look in, and let go. There's a few stories of the Buddha that might help us elucidate a little bit more what it means to see this present moment as a precious moment. And I think whenever we hear about any sort of deity or revered figure, it can sometimes be helpful to distinguish between the historical figure and the living figure. The living figure is the one that is alive right now in our hearts, in our words, in the way that we talk about and discuss this figure. The historical figure is just the facts, ma'am, as an officer might say. So Thich Nhat Hanh also has a lovely book called Living Buddha, Living Christ, where he talks about the living Buddha, the living Christ that is right here, right now, in contrast to the historical figure. So as an example, most historians do not believe that a man named Jesus the Christ or Jesus Christ was crucified and then resurrected 3 days later, which is pretty much required to believe in for those in the Christian faith. Because as far as we know, resurrection is physically impossible. That being said, most historians do agree that there was a man by the name of Jesus who did live in Nazareth, who did live for roughly 27 years, who was crucified on the cross. And when there is much we can learn, both from the historical figure as well as the living figure, that is the Jesus that is talked about today. In the same way, there is the historical Buddha, a man by the name of Siddhartha Gautama, who was born a prince. And then there is, of course, the living Buddha, which can take many forms that we see throughout the world. Now, interestingly, when you go to the East and you start getting into a lot of these kind of sacred texts, a number of the texts are referred to as smriti. So as we just learned, smriti means remembered. And it's kind of like an old fishing story where every time you tell it, it changes a little bit and you embellish a little bit. Oh, you should have seen the fish I caught last year. It was 10 pounds. Oh, you should have seen the fish I caught 5 years ago. It was 15 pounds. Oh, yeah, that fish I caught when I was younger, 25-pound fish should have been there. It was pretty incredible. And in the Eastern texts, they're not as concerned with the historicity of their texts because it's a story. As Sadhguru says, a story like the Gita or the Puranas, it's not about facts, it's about truth. It's about the lessons that lie therein. So, for example, before the Buddha was born, there was a great sage by the name of Kundinya who predicted the birth of the Buddha. So I encourage all of you yogis to think about that next time you are in Ekapada Kundinyasana. That is Kundinya's pose. It is his pose. Kundinya is the revered sage that predicted the birth of the Buddha. So historically, the Buddha was a prince that was born to a king and a queen. But then there's the living Buddha, which is the legend, the myth. So you get into some texts, and it does not say that the Buddha was birthed by his mother. It is said that he came out of the side of his mother, and despite being a newly born child, the Buddha walked 7 steps forward and he uttered, I am the supreme being on this earth. This is my last birth, where I shall uproot birth, old age, sickness, and death. And it is said, as the legend goes, every step that the Buddha took, a lotus flower bloomed exactly where his footprint is. So I think most people with common sense, I suppose, or most historians would not agree with this myth of the Buddha that he sprung forth from his mother's side and then suddenly was able to walk and talk in the first few minutes of his life. But again, it's not about facts, it's about truth. It's about what are we to make of this story that the Buddha took 7 steps. Well, if you've been paying attention, every step that we can take is a miracle. Every breath that we can take is a miracle. So the Buddha taught that to walk on this earth, to take 7 steps on this earth is a miracle. So that is the other thing about many Eastern texts is they're full of miracles. You're not going to impress anyone in India by saying, yes, well, Jesus, he walked on water. He was able to feed many people with a fish. He turned water into wine. You read Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and with enough yoga practice, you can levitate, you can become very small, you can become telekinetic, you can have all the knowledge of your previous lives. It's full of miracles and superhuman and supernatural abilities. But we are also told that this human birth is precious, and just to walk on this earth is a miracle. So being in our bodies is a miracle. So this is why the Buddha did teach mindfulness. He taught anapanasati, mindfulness of the breath. So as we practice mindfulness, we can always recognize it's always mindfulness of something. Mindful walking, mindful speaking, mindful breathing, mindful drinking tea, mindful eating. We are here to be fully present to whatever circumstances that life presents to us. So another legend of the Buddha is that during one of his lectures, he held up a flower to a large audience of monks. This is known as the silent lecture at Vulture Peak. And it is said that he held up a flower and smiled. And every single monk in the audience stood there, almost waiting for him to expound upon why exactly he was holding up this flower, except for one monk by the name of Mahakasyapa, who looked at the flower offered by the Buddha. He understood, he smiled, and in that moment became enlightened. So we might think again, what does this story mean? What does it mean of the holding of the flower and the one person in the audience who understood? So some say that this was the birth of the Zen tradition. And a huge tenet of the Zen tradition is that mind-to-mind transition of enlightenment is possible. So this is saying basically that if you have the right guru, your guru doesn't need to say a single thing in order for their mind to transmit to yours the feeling and experience of enlightenment. Now, that is one interpretation of this story. But even if we acknowledge this reality of the Zen tradition, I think we have to recognize that Mahaskapya, in this case, his mind was ready. His mind was prepared. So as we often say, enlightenment happens on accident. You can't control it. You can't force it. You can't will it. If you could will it, you'd probably be enlightened by now, right? Or lots of people would be enlightened by now if you could just sit in meditation and force and squeeze and will your way to full satori and sudden awakening. But it doesn't work like that. It's almost similar to like falling asleep. There are conditions that you can create in your environment in order to be conducive to the act of falling asleep. But nevertheless, falling asleep is not up to you. Neither is awakening. Awakening is not up to you either. That being said, as the saying goes, enlightenment happens by accident. However, we can make ourselves more accident prone. So, this is our preparation. This is our practice. We are making ourselves more accident prone. So, the story of the historical Buddha is that at the age of 27, he was a prince and he came upon old age, sickness, and death and realized we all suffer. So, he sought to alleviate himself of suffering. And where did he go? He went to the yogis. And in the forest in India at the time, he found some very strange beings sitting naked in the hot 100-degree Punjabi sun, standing on one leg in what many of us would consider to be tree pose, taking their arms up, lifting their head up, and staring directly at the sun. That is one of the earliest yoga poses, is tree pose. And this is a fierce form of tapascharya, which you could translate as discipline. You could also translate it as the ability to withstand suffering. So sitting in the hot sun on one leg for as long as humanly possible, fasting for days without end, no food, no water, sitting in meditation posture for hours or days upon end. These are all forms of tapas, all forms of intense austerities. Now, some say that the Buddha was doing this about 6 to 7 years, and then he gave up. He was like, you know what? This path is not working. The path of indulgence didn't work in my life as a prince, and the path of complete renunciation didn't work. So therefore, I'm going to try the middle path. And I think that's a perfectly valid interpretation, but I prefer to think that the yoga helped, that the yoga prepared the Buddha, or Siddhartha at the time, before he became known as the Buddha, to be more accident prone. The tapas, the discipline, the sitting for hours in meditation, it made the mind ready for enlightenment. And this is what I found as a teacher. I might teach to 15 students in the room, and I have found that I will say something, and that statement will be interpreted 15 different ways. And people will come to their own conclusions. So this is why we begin with our intention, because we can control our actions, but we cannot control the results of our actions. So we even have this saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I think it's very easy to, again, interpret this statement to mean like, oh, once you're ready, poof, a teacher will just appear in front of you. You'll just bump into them on the street and your teacher will be there. However, I think what it means by when the student is ready, the teacher will appear is that when the mind of the student is ready, they will recognize all the teachers that are already there around them. All the teachers that have been trying to teach certain subjects, certain concepts, finally the mind is ready to receive. So Zen Master Dogen says, to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the ego self. And to forget the ego self is to be enlightened by all things. So I think that's very telling. To be enlightened by all things. So I don't think it's just a coincidence that the Buddha was putting forth a flower. I think a flower has the capacity to enlighten us, just as the breath has the capacity to enlighten us, just as walking 7 steps has the capacity to enlighten us. So there's never a dull moment when you're in touch with reality as it is. When we bring our full attention to the task at hand, whether it is mindful breathing, mindful sitting, mindful walking, or mindfully gazing at a flower, we will learn from that experience. Flowers have so much to teach us. There's so much we can learn about impermanence. about how what we call a flower is just a temporary explosion, how to step into new, more loving, more kind, more full, more colorful, more light-filled versions of ourselves. We have to shed old layers, release the small seed-like, shell-like conceptions of ourselves, and to notice all the miracles that are around us, all the flowers that are around us. So there's a story of when one monk was asked why he wakes up at 4 a.m. just to walk to the meditation hall to chant and meditate. He said, I wake up early to walk to the meditation hall to chant and meditate so that I can fully notice the flowers on my way to the meditation hall. We are here to be present. We are training the mind to be present because when we always feel like we're on our way somewhere, I was just having a discussion today with a student on the way to yoga, and we were just talking about how funny it is when you're in a hurry to go to yoga, when you're like, oh, I gotta hurry up, I gotta go to relax. And when we always feel like we're on our way somewhere and we're always thinking about the future, we miss all the joys, all the flowers that are on the way to where we are going. So the human life is precious. It is special. We have eyes in good condition that can see all the colors of the flowers. We have ears in good condition that can hear the birds sing and the birds and the bees buzz as they go to said flowers. Our attention is the juice. Our attention and our awareness is key. So Rumi put it this way: don't go off sightseeing. The real journey is right here. The great excursion starts from exactly where you are. You are the world. You have everything you need. You are the secret. You are the wide opened. Don't look for the remedy for your troubles outside yourself. You are the medicine. You are the cure for your own sorrow. Mm. So I think one final lesson we can learn from flowers is that if you want anything to grow, you have to nourish it. Nature teaches us that for anything to grow, it must have a continuous influx of nutrients. For a flower to grow, it needs light and water and a fertilized soil. Same thing. If we want our love to grow, if we want our relationships to grow, if we want our presence to grow, we have to nourish it. We have to practice it. It won't happen on its own. So, with that, let's arrive in the space. Let's arrive in this moment, coming to your meditation posture, closing the eyes or keeping them open, taking a few deep breaths to arrive in this present moment and to see it is a precious moment. Inhaling to this present moment, exhaling, recognizing it is a precious moment. And so often we're told to notice the breath, which is certainly a valid approach, but we can also enjoy the breath. It's allowed. So as you take a few more deep breaths, enjoy the breath. Enjoy this miracle of the breath. If you are breathing, you are alive. And if you are alive, you have this incomparable privilege to exist, this preciousness of a human life. We honor this gift of life. We honor this new day by being present for it, by enjoying each breath, savoring each breath as it flows in and out. It is said that when Saint Francis went to the almond tree and said, "Speak to me of God," the almond tree bloomed into countless flowers, which is to say, aliveness is divine. There is no other way to witness God than to witness aliveness, flowering, and blossoming. Talking won't get you there, just as the word water won't cure your thirst, or the word food won't cure your hunger. Only this moment experienced fully. May we all be active participants in this life, being present for each and every precious moment, to recognize that nothing lasts, and every moment, every person is precious. We honor that preciousness, that aliveness, and that divinity with a very simple word. Namaste.